Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Ryan and today we are going to talk about how to fill out your character sheet. So if you're starting a brand new character in Dungeons and Dragons, that character sheet can be, honestly, looking at it can be kind of daunting, and I'm not going to lie to you and be like, oh, this is super simple. It's not. It's really not, and you just need to know that coming out the gate. This is going to be something that, unless you've played Dungeons and Dragons a bunch, you're probably going to need to take could be half an hour, could be more, to sift through all this and get it all sorted before you're ready to hit the ground running in your first session. A couple of quick things to note before you fill this thing out. First, it's always good to chat with your DM and your co-players in your session before you do this, or even set down a time for you to do it all together at the same time, because it can actually make light work when you can provide a little bit more insight for your fellow gamers. But also, one of the things you're going to need to do is make sure that you understand the setting of your campaign that you're running. So talk to your DM. You might be like, hey, I really want to make a character who's a Saloon Knight. You just finished playing Baldur's Gate 3 and you're like, ooh, Saloon Knights are kind of cool. I'll play as one of them. And then your DM's like, Saloona doesn't exist in the world that we're playing in. You know, could be a different pantheon. Maybe it's not even on Faerun. So you might be like, I'm from Waterdeep, and your DM's like, we're not playing in Faerun, man. So just chat with your DM and your co-players up front before you make a character, because you don't want to come to the table and both of you made a fighter. Diversify your skill sets. Be like, I'm going to be a brute. Your teammate's like, I'm going to be all about sneakiness, and then maybe one of them is going to be like a spellcaster. Maybe you've got a bard. So you want to cover all of your bases and make sure that you have a nice diverse party to play with. The second thing you need to do is you should probably get one of these. This is the Player Handbook, 5th edition for Dungeons and Dragons. It's going to give you all the information that you need, and we're going to be referencing a lot of this information as we fill out our character sheet. Now, you can find all of that information online. There are actually some websites that will generate a character sheet for you if you're like, it's just way too much for me, I don't want to do it. Just be like, just make me a fighter, and this is what his name is, and it will just auto-fill stuff in for you and make a legal playable character for you. But otherwise, like I said, you can find this information online, but the easiest way to have it all condensed in one spot for you while you're filling out your sheet is to have the Player Handbook. Now that we got that out of the way, let's get started filling out our character sheet. Okay, so where do we start on this big, complicated page? So the first thing that we're really going to want to do is we want to select our race, our class, and our background. Those are the three things that are going to dictate the rest of the information on this sheet. So that's where we're going to start and set the framing, the groundwork for our character. So I've decided that I want to make a really sort of gruff, grizzled, war veteran dwarf, right? And I want him to be a real brawler. So we're going to start with a race. I'm going to select dwarf. And if I go to the player handbook and I look up the dwarf race, one of the first things it's going to tell me is that my movement speed as a dwarf is going to be 30 feet. So I'm just going to come down here to the speed block. We'll go ahead and get this out of the way. We're going to write down 30 feet. That is the amount of distance I can travel in a single turn of combat. It also tells me that I have dark vision. So I'm just going to go ahead and come down here into the features and traits section, and I'm going to list out all the dwarven features that come with, well, just being a dwarf. One of them, like I said, dark vision. I have dark vision range of 120 feet that I can see in the dark. I also have dwarven resilience. I have dwarven toughness. And finally, I have stone cunning. And you can then look up these keywords in the glossary at the end of the player handbook and be like, okay, well, what does that mean? What does stone vision or stone cunning do for me? What does dark vision do for me? And so you just want to make sure that you understand what these things are, because that's going to dictate a lot of the things that you can do both in and outside of combat and while role-playing. Once I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and pick my background. Now, there are a lot of backgrounds to choose from, and they will very heavily modify what your key features are, your core traits are, the equipment that you're carrying, all that stuff. So I'm going to select the background soldier, and then I'm going to pick my class. And there are a lot of classes to choose from, but for my grizzled war veteran dwarf, I'm going to have him be a fighter. And I'm starting this campaign at level 1. Now, sometimes your DM will let you know in advance, hey, the campaign we're going to be running is balanced for players that are level 5 or whatever it may be. And so they may fast track you up to that level, in which case you'll want to fill out this whole sheet as if you were level 1 and then start walking through the level up process for your class specifically. But I'm starting at level 1, so I'm going to write down fighter level 1. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to focus on these big boxes on the left-hand side of the player sheet. and it says strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. These are very important stat values, so we're going to start filling them out. And the most common way to do this is to use what is called the standard array. The standard array is going to give you preset values of 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, and 8. And then you, as a player, can decide which one is going to be the 15, which one's going to be the highest value, and then which one's going to be your lowest value of 8. Now, you can look up in the player handbook what their recommendations are for your standard array for your class, or you can just wing it and say, here's what I think are going to be important features for my character to have. So for my grizzled, old war veteran dwarf, I think strength is going to be the most important thing for him as a fighter. His strength is really important. I also want him to be really hardy, so I'm going to go with Constitution as being my next highest, which is a value 14. Constitution is basically a measurement of how healthy you are, how sturdy you are. If you were, for example, to be in a bar game in a tavern where you're going to see who between you and an NPC can drink more, tankards of ale before they pass out, your DM might have you roll Constitution saving throws. So the more, constitution you have, the healthier you are. You can resist things like poison. It also affects things like your total hit points. So I want my guy to be tough. I'm going with constitution. After that, I want wisdom to be my next highest value because I think that my grizzled old dwarf has seen some stuff. So this is like your experiences in life. It's like street smarts. It's not how intelligent you are. That is a completely different value. So my guy's seen some stuff. He's been around the world. He has a lot of wisdom to share from his years. After that, I'm going with dexterity. He needs to be good with his hands, and your dexterity is exactly that. It's how good are you with your hands. It affects, or just body control in general. So this could affect things like acrobatics, sleight of hand, being able to use ranged weapons, things like that. It's also going to affect our initiative bonus, which we'll get to later. After that, I'm going with intelligence. He's not the smartest guy, but he's also not an idiot. He hasn't done a whole lot of book reading. And lastly, he's not very charismatic. In fact, he's a little brash. He might be kind of difficult to get along with. So my charisma is going to be my lowest value of 8. The next thing we need to do is calculate our bonuses. These are determined by how far above or below the standard value of 10 these values are. So for strength, we have a value of 15. Now, if you are at 14 or 15, that is considered 2 degrees higher than 10. So it's going to give us a +2 modifier. So for both Constitution and Strength, we're going to end up with a +2 bonus. Then if we were to then go to Wisdom and Dexterity at values of 12 and 13, these are both considered to be 1 degree, 1 full degree higher than the standard of 10. So they're going to get a +1 bonus. Now, these bonuses are all listed in the player handbook for you, so you can calculate them on your own. My intelligence is at 10, so that's a net 0. My charisma is really low at 8, and that's going to give us a -1. The next thing we need to look at is our proficiency bonus. Now, I'm going to write in +2 because at level 1, I have a standard +2 to all of my proficiencies. Proficiencies, you might ask, what the heck are those? It's the specific skills that you're good at, skills and saving throws. So down below, we'll see a box that is labeled saving throws and a bigger box that's labeled skills. So as we look at our race, background, and class, we are going to see that there's some things that we are proficient in. And so if our class or our background says we're proficient in something, we're going to fill in that little bubble to the left just to say, yep, that's something I'm good at. And then we will apply our proficiency bonus. For example, I look up fighter and soldier, and it's going to tell me that my saving throw proficiencies, I'm proficient in constitution and strength saving throws. What the heck is a saving throw? Well, as you're playing, you're going to encounter certain obstacles or ailments, things like that are going to require you to throw a saving throw. Maybe somebody's trying to shove you off a cliff. Maybe someone is trying to mind control you. Maybe somebody's trying to poison you. And you're going to need to roll a saving throw on your dice. So let's calculate our modifiers here. We are proficient in strength, which means that we are going to take our strength modifier of +2, and we're also proficient in it because we got the bubble filled in there. So we're going to add our proficiency bonus on top of that. So the two values added together, 2 + 2, means that we have a saving throw modifier for strength of +4. If we look at dexterity, I'm not proficient, so I don't get to add my proficiency bonus, but I do have a +1 to dexterity. So my dexterity saving throw modifier value is going to be +1. Moving on to constitution, I do have a +2 to constitution. I'm also proficient in constitution, so those two together, +4. Intelligence is a net 0. Wisdom I have a +1 in, and charisma is -1. So if I were to roll for a charisma saving throw, I would have to then subtract 1 from the total d20 value that I roll. Let's move down to our skills, and we're going to calculate the same thing. Now, according to my class, fighter, and my background, soldier, I have some choices I can make for the skills that I'm going to be proficient in. And this is where you get to make some choices. Now, there's going to be some overlap. So if both soldier and fighter say athletics is a choice, well, I don't want to double dip, so I'll diversify. I'll say, well, fighter says I'm good at athletics, so I won't choose that as my background soldier proficiency. So I'm going to select athletics, insight, intimidation, and survival. And now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to calculate what our modifiers are. Acrobatics, I'm not proficient in, so I just take my dexterity modifier, which is +1. Animal handling, I'm not proficient in it, so I just take my wisdom modifier of +1. Arcana is 0 because of intelligence. My athletics, I am proficient in, so I add my proficiency bonus, plus my strength modifier of +2, so collectively that's a +4. Deception is going to be -1. History 0. I'm proficient in insight, so I'm going to go +2 for my proficiency bonus, my wisdom modifier of +1. Collectively that means +3. Intimidation, this is an interesting thing. I have a -1 to charisma, but I have a +2 proficiency bonus, so that's a net +1. And so on and so forth until we get down to survival, which I'm proficient in, and I add my wisdom modifier, so that's +3. You can see that each skill has a corresponding ability. For example, acrobatics, sleight of hand, and stealth all correspond to your dexterity. That's how you know which modifiers to take. Next, let's move to the right into the middle column here. You will see there's inspiration up to the left. Don't worry about that. That's something that your DM can choose to grant you during play if you do something that is particularly in line with your character and their driving forces. So don't worry about that now. We'll handle armor class in a little bit as we look at what armor we're going to be wearing, but for now, let's look at initiative. Your initiative bonus is just going to be your dexterity modifier. So for me, that's +1. Basically what that means is that when we get into combat, everybody's going to need to roll a d20, a 20-sided dice, to decide what order we're going to be going in. So with an initiative modifier of +1, that means that I will roll my d20. If I were to roll, for example, a 7, I would then add 1 to my value, which is an 8. We also need to calculate our total hit points. So hit points are decided by the value of your hit dice. Your hit dice is dictated by your class. So if I were to look up the fighter class, it would tell me right there on the front page that my hit dice is a d10. So my total hit points are going to be the highest value that I could roll on a d10, which is a 10. And then I'm going to add my constitution modifier, which is +2 for me. That means the most hit points I can have is 12. So my current hit points, 12, because I haven't taken any damage. Not all classes use a d10, some use a d8, so you might end up with just 8 hit points at level 1. And then as you level up, you're going to add extra hit dice, and your total hit point value is going to increase. Next, let's come down to the bottom left corner of the first page here, where it says Other Proficiencies and Languages. So we're going to go ahead and fill this in by looking at our class and by looking at our background. And they're going to tell us the things that we're proficient in. So for me, as a fighter and a soldier, I am told that I'm proficient in simple and martial weapons. I know how to use light, medium, and heavy armor. I can use shields. And then you're also going to have a tool that you're proficient in. So it could be thieves' tools if you're good at lock picking. For me, it's actually a gaming set. As a soldier, spend a lot of time on the road, we play a lot of games, so I've selected playing cards. That also makes me better at detecting if somebody's cheating in a tavern. We're also going to write down the languages that we know. As a dwarf, I can speak Common and Dwarven. Your DM may put limitations here. They could say you can only know 2, maybe you want to know 3, so consult with them first. Next, I need to list out all of the equipment that I have. That is dictated by both my background and my class. So check your class, check your background. They'll tell you all the things that you can start with. They're going to give you a couple of options. One is usually going to be just a standard array of items that you can use. And option B is usually just going to be extra gold. And you're going to take the extra gold if you're starting out. And again, talk to your DM about this. They could basically have it where you start your campaign by purchasing items that you want to use. So you could start that way. Otherwise, just take the standard gear that you are offered. And so it's going to give you a list of gear and a little bit of gold. So you'll see currency like copper, silver, platinum, gold. So in GP, I'm going to write 18 because collectively between my background and my class, I have 18 gold. And if you want to know what these items do and what their value is if you were to sell them off, you can check the player handbook to see all items in D&D and what their values are and what they can do. For example, that Dungeoneers pack has a lot of interesting things in it, so you want to check the glossary and see what all's inside that thing. Next, we're going to come up here to attacks and spellcasting. This is really going to depend on the class that you chose. So if you're a spellcaster, this is going to look very different. This is where things start to get a little bit complex. I know you're like, it wasn't already complex? So spellcasters follow different rules. You're going to scroll down to the bottom page, which is going to have things like cantrips, level 1 spell slots, level 2 spell slots, etc. But for me, I am a fighter. I'm using weapons. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the weapons that I have in my equipment section, and I'm going to start equipping them and listing out what I can do with them. So let's look at the flail. The flail is labeled as a martial weapon, which I am proficient in, so I can use it. You can use things that you're not proficient in, but you're going to have a penalty, and you're not going to get nearly as much mileage out of those things. So I'm going to write down flail. Next, we need to talk about attack bonus. How do I calculate that? For ranged weapons, you're going to use your dexterity modifier, and then add your proficiency bonus if you are proficient in that kind of weapon. If it's a melee weapon, we're going to use our strength modifier instead of our dexterity modifier. So the flail I am proficient with, so I'm going to add my proficiency bonus, which is +2. And since it's a melee weapon, I'm going to add my strength bonus, which is also +2. Collectively, that means my attack bonus is +4. Does that mean I do 4 damage? No. An attack bonus basically is deciding via roll of the dice if your attack lands. So for example, if I'm attacking a little goblin and he doesn't have any armor on and his armor class is 10, I'm going to roll a d20. And if I were to get, for example, a 6, I'm going to then add my attack bonus onto that, which is 4. So that is a 10. So his armor class is 10. I need to get a 10 or higher. I did get a 10, which means my attack lands. And now I move on to rolling to see how much damage I do. So that's your attack bonus. Let's move on to the damage now, your damage and damage type. Now the player handbook itself will tell you what kind of a dice you're going to roll for damage. A flail uses a d8, so I'm going to roll 1d8, and then I'm going to add my strength modifier since this is a melee weapon, which is +2. So I'm going to roll a d8, add 2 to it, and the damage type is bludgeoning. So I'm going to write down bludgeon. Why does the damage type matter? Well, some things are going to be weak to bludgeoning and other things are going to be resistant to bludgeoning, which means my damage is going to be lesser or greater depending on their resistances. Again, I'll look up the greatsword next. Attack bonus, same thing. Strength modifier plus proficiency modifier, so +4. It does 2d6s in damage. I'm going to add 2 for my strength modifier since it's a melee weapon. And it does slashing damage. And finally, I'm going to write down the short bow. This is a simple weapon, and I am proficient in simple weapons. It's a ranged weapon, so I use my dexterity modifier. So it's going to be +1, plus my proficiency of +2, so that's +3. It does 1d6 +1, because it's my dexterity modifier is +1, and it's going to do piercing damage. Now you could also write down any other level 1 spells or abilities that you could use in combat. Maybe you have a special sword that has a special attack you can use. You would write that down here. We also want to write down our passive wisdom, which is your passive perception. So that's going to be 10 is just the flat value here. And then you're going to add your perception modifier. So for me, my perception modifier is +1. So I'm going to be sitting at a passive wisdom value of 11. Now we're going to start getting a little bit more detailed. We're going to check out our class and our background and see if there's anything else that we missed. Let's start with our class and look at level 1. As a fighter at level 1, I'm going to get access to a couple of things. First, I get to choose a feat that is specifically a fighting style feat. So I'm going to go to the chapter in the player handbook for feats, and I'm going to look up fighting style feats, and I'm going to select one that I want. I kind of want to use this great sword and have him be a real heavy hitter, so I'm going to choose great weapon fighting. Also at level 1, I get second wind, which is a bonus action that I can use to regenerate some health in combat. And finally, I get weapon mastery. If you have mastered a weapon, you get a sort of extra passive bonus when you use that weapon, when you hit with that weapon. So I'm going to choose the flail, the greatsword, and the short bow for my 3, which apply sap, graze, and vex. And again, the weapons chapter in the handbook will tell you what each of those does. We're almost done. You're doing great. I'm so proud of you. I'm going to flip over to my background, which also gives me the feature Savage Attacker. Once per turn, when I hit a target, I can roll damage twice and use the highest roll. So make sure nothing slips through the cracks. Let's scroll back up to the top. You're going to see things like temporary hit points. Don't worry about that for now. That's something that your DM could award you, something that other abilities down the road could award you in the middle of combat. But for right now, you don't have any temporary hit points, so don't put anything in there. One very important stat value here is your armor class, and you can find out what your armor class is simply by looking at what armor you have on. So for my guy, in the inventory, the equipment that I've been given based on my class choice and my background choice, some of the armor that I have in my possession is chainmail, so I think I'm going to wear that. I want to be a big guy, big heavy hitter. So I just simply look up the chainmail in the player handbook, and it tells me exactly right there what the armor class value is. It's just a flat 16, so that's what I'm going to put in. But other classes and other pieces of armor might have modifiers where it'll say it's actually going to be an armor class of 8, but then you're going to add your dexterity modifier on top of that. So if you were a very dexterous rogue and that meant that you had a +4 bonus, then your armor class would be 12. Your armor class is basically the roll that a combatant needs to get on their hit dice in order to successfully hit you and then roll for damage. So your dungeon master will be rolling the dice for those combatants and seeing if their attacks land on you. So they may ask you from time to time, hey, what's your armor class? So that they know what they need to roll in order to hit you. You'll also see death saves. So if you go down in combat, if your hit points are reduced to 0, you're going to go into a downed state. And you're going to need to roll to see if you die or stay alive. 3 successes, and you can stand back up with 1 hit point. 3 failures before somebody heals you or picks you up or you receive healing of any kind. 3 failures will put you in the grave, and you're going to need to start a new character sheet. But for now, you can leave that empty because you're not in combat. Let's talk about your alignment up here. This is going to be sort of your character's general disposition towards life. Are they chaotic evil, or are they just... they'll do whatever in the moment seems fun and exciting to them, whatever they feel like, and they really like to be evil. Are they chaotic but good? They generally like to be good people and do good things and help people out, but they're also a bit of a wild card. For me, my grizzled dwarf, he's going to be what we call lawful neutral. So he likes to abide by the law. He likes to follow a code to make him feel like he's, doing things properly. And he's going to be neutral, where whether he's doing good or evil doesn't really matter. He's just going to be a sort of middle-of-the-road person and let the law of the land dictate his actions. And again, all of these alignments are listed out in the player handbook for you to choose from. Next, we have personality traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws. This is more about what makes your character tick. Now, there are lists of potential traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws in the player handbook if you just want to copy those down, the ones that sound right to you. Otherwise, you can just make these up entirely if you want to really think about your character's backstory. For flaws, our guy was a soldier, so he likes to maybe drink a little more than he should. He enjoys a good round of ale. And then sometimes he might actually forego doing the morally good thing in favor of doing the legally or contractually binding thing. And finally, we got to give him a name. Now, a lot of people like to start with a name. I kind of like to end with the name. Now that we have a person really made, we know how strong they are, how charismatic and convincing they are. We know what they're skilled at. We know what makes them tick. We know what abilities they have. That really puts a character into perspective for me, and I think that a name is often something that can reflect those things. So we need a good, strong, stout name. So let's go with Baird Stoutstone. And then if you scroll down to the next sheet, you can then get even more creative. What color are their eyes? How old are they? How tall are they? And some of those things need to be dictated by your race. Like, obviously, I'm playing as a dwarf. I'm not going to be 7 feet tall like a Goliath. So make sure you stay within the confines of your race, but get a little creative there too. And you have done it. Congratulations. You have a playable character. So make sure you read this over multiple times. Look up in the glossary definitions of words you don't understand, because you really want to be able to know all of the things that your character can do. That's what's really going to separate them in your campaign from all of the other characters as well. Okay, and now you have a playable character. You're ready to go. So best of luck to you as you dive into your first session with your new character. And let me know in the comments section below if you found this helpful. And let me know how your campaign goes too. All right, be warm and well fed, my friends. And I hope to catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.